This is a 1996 Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 4, and it's a very cool sports sedan that we didn't get here in the States. Back in the 90s, the Japanese made a lot of cool stuff that they didn't offer here, and we played them in video games and we dreamed. But now, this car is legal to import, it's here, and today I'm going to review this Evo 4 and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, good news, this Evo 4 is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This Evo is almost entirely unmodified, which is tremendously rare for these, and it has the famous 4G63 turbo 4-cylinder, a manual transmission, and all-wheel drive, the famous Evo ingredients, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Evo 4, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Evo 4. Starting with the basics, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution was a high-performance version of Mitsubishi's compact car, which was called the Lancer. In the States, we knew it as the Mitsubishi Mirage, but overseas it was the Mitsubishi Lancer, and the Evolution was the fast one. The high-performance, exciting version that was intended to pay tribute to and based on the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo rally car, which was a very successful rally car at the time. Now, this whole story sounds a lot like the Subaru Impreza WRX, which was the high-performance version of Subaru's small car, also intended to pay tribute to their successful rally car. And indeed, these were rivals, close competitors all throughout the 1990s, the WRX from Subaru and the Evo from Mitsubishi, and neither were sold in the United States. They were offered in video games, we played them in Gran Turismo, but we couldn't drive them until finally the WRX came to the US in 2002 and Mitsubishi brought the Evo to the States in 2003. Now by then, they were on the Evo 8, very far removed from this, the Evo 4. And so, until recently, these cars have become 25 years old, legal to import to the US. They were previously forbidden fruit. So let's check out and see what this has we couldn't get all these years. We start with performance. Now, among the early Evo models, the 4, this one, is particularly desirable because it was based on a brand new version of the Lancer, the US Mirage, which also came out for 96. So the Evo 1, 2, and 3 were on an earlier body style that improved and was modernized for the Evo 4, 5, and 6 that were all on this Lancer chassis. Now, despite the differences in the base car, virtually all Evo models used this powertrain. This is the 4G63 turbocharged 4-cylinder, and it was installed in every Evo from the 1 to the 9. Only the final generation Evo 10 got a different powertrain. This is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it made 276 horsepower. I use air quotes here because all Japanese performance cars from this era had 276 horsepower as a matter of agreement. The Japanese automakers decided they didn't want to get into some horsepower war that would lead to people crashing their cars as they got more powerful. So they all said the cars would have 276 horses. That was the number they decided on, and this is one of those 276 horsepower gentleman's agreement cars. In this particular case, I suspect the actual power output was pretty close to the 276 horse figure, but we will never really know for sure. Now, in addition to the 4G63, all these Evo 4 models and the other Evos had a manual transmission standard, in this case a 5-speed manual. There was no automatic option, and all-wheel drive was standard. Even though the regular Lancer was front-wheel drive, that was another big improvement for the Evolution. And because this was based on a compact economy car, the Mitsubishi Mirage, it wasn't very big in overall size, but also weight. This car, the curb weight with fluid fluids is around 3,000 pounds, which is relatively small and light, particularly considering the power output. Now, beyond the performance, the Ford G63, the manual transmission, all-wheel drive, the Evo always looked the part. It always had much cooler, more exciting, aggressive styling than the regular Lancer Mirage base car. In fact, by the Evo 4, this car, they were really starting to hit their stride, and you could barely tell it was based on a cheap little economy car. One big upgrade came to the bumper, which you can see has these giant fog lights integrated into it. They're absolutely huge. This basically debuted for the Evo 4, and it was carried on for the next few Evo models through the famed Evo 6. These fog lights, a very distinctive look and meant to tie the car to its rally heritage, where these giant lights are used to light up the racetrack as you're rallying along. Beyond that, many other upgrades. You can see the hood has vents in the front, air intake, and heat dissipation, obviously to allow the larger engine to breathe. You also had a body kit going essentially the entire way around the car, starting with that front bumper with the big fog lights, but then continuing down the side. The rocker panels have this sort of flared side portion that makes the car look lower and more aggressive, and that continued on to the rear as well, where there was even more body kit to change the look from the regular Lancer. Now, probably the biggest upgrade to any Evo model from this era was the wing, which was enormous and enormously distinctive, and it too really helped set this apart from a regular non-Evo Lancer model. The wing is huge, like I mentioned, and it's also huge how it's mounted on the trunk. They didn't just screw in the base supports. Like, the entire bottom of the wing takes up a lot of the surface area of the trunk, and I think a big part of this is because the wing includes the third brake light. So you also have some wiring integrated into here, and then of course the brake light itself. But this massive wing was always associated with the Evo. It was a big part of this car, and you can see it here. Other upgrades on the outside of this car, for one, a rear wiper. Not commonly seen on four-door sedans, which this is, a sedan with a trunk. You see wipers on hatchbacks and SUVs, but in the Japanese market in the 80s and 90s, some sedans had rear wipers, typically more expensive or high-performance cars like this one. The standard Lancer wouldn't have had one, but the Evo did. Also upgraded, of course, is badging. You have Evolution 4 written on the back, which is pretty cool, and you also have it printed on the rear doors. So just in case the giant wing and the fog lights weren't giveaway enough, well, the doors scream exactly what this car is. I also love the wheels. You can see these are OZ Racing wheels, and that's made especially clear because there's OZ Racing branding all over the wheel. It's printed on the wheel twice in the center, and then the center cap itself is not a Mitsubishi logo, but another OZ Racing logo. Despite all of this non-Mitsubishi branding on the outside of the car, these are the stock original wheels from this car. Mitsubishi just didn't care, I guess, that their brand wasn't represented on the wheels, and instead it was all OZ Racing. It seems aftermarket, but in fact, it is not. And next up, we move inside the Evo 4, where there is quite a lot to cover. Many quirks and features in here, but we start with the most obvious, noticeable. I am sitting on the opposite side of the car, the right. That's because this is a right-hand drive Evo imported from Japan, where they drive on the opposite side for us Americans. In fact, all of the Evo 4 models were sold in Japan. The Evo was initially intended to only ever be sold in Japan, but by the time the Evo 4 showed up, there started to be demand from other markets. Other countries started to want it, and within a few years of this car, they were selling it overseas. First, it was gray imports brought over by really excited Evo owners, but then officially Mitsubishi started offering it, culminating in it coming to the US in 03 for the Evo 8, like I mentioned. But moving on from that, one other important thing to point out is that the Evo 4 was offered in two versions. There was the RS model, and there was the GSR. The RS was essentially a base model, but really it was the sport version, the high-performance model of the high-performance model. And that's, in theory, the one you want, except it was pretty stripped down and basic. For example, air conditioning was optional, it had manual windows, it didn't have anti-lock brakes, it was the enthusiast car, but it was also kind of compromised. The majority of Evo 4 models, including this one, were instead the GSR, which added in anti-lock brakes, standard air conditioning, power windows, and other stuff like dual airbags and a sunroof. The GSR was the nicer, more comfortable way to still get a high-performance Evo. Now, another cool thing that the GSR had was the Recaro Seats, which you can see here. These very cool, surprisingly well bolstered for 30 years ago, Recaro Seats intended to keep you in place on the racetrack. And they have two especially cool quirks. One is the hole at the top of the backrest near the headrest where you would put your racing harness. It would go through here, and then you would suit up, harness up, and then you could get this on the track and have a real track day experience. The other interesting thing about these Recaro Seats is, of course, the cloth pattern in the center. It is a very 90s kind of lines and squares and rectangles, reddish cloth pattern down the center of the seats. And you can see they also carried this pattern over to the door panels, which again feels very 90s and adds a little bit of fun and excitement into this interior. But beyond that stuff, some more interesting quirks and features in here. Probably the quirkiest quirk is this switch in the middle. You can see it has a square on it and then some like water coming down from a sprayer, and that is indeed a sprayer button for the intercooler. The theory here was you're on a track day, on a very hot day, hot temperatures, you would press this button to spray water onto the intercooler to keep it cool, to prevent power loss from excessive heat from the engine. Not too many cars have a button where you can spray down the engine with water, but this is one such car, and it's interesting to see that integrated here. Another interesting item in here is the steering wheel, which once again wasn't heavily Mitsubishi branded. Like the wheels on the outside, you can see Momo takes front and center at this steering wheel, although you do have a very small Mitsubishi script below Momo, just to remind you exactly what car you're driving in. Now, behind the steering wheel, on the driver's side, you have this hidden panel the passenger can't access. You open it up, and it's a little storage compartment where you can stick stuff, smaller things that you want to keep out of reach or keep secret from your passenger, a secret driver's storage compartment, which is kind of cool. Also interesting in this car is the climate controls, which you can see are here in the center control stack. The interesting part is this screen integrated into the climate controls, which is pretty advanced for 1996. 30 years ago, it already had a screen to display where the air was coming out, the temperature, etc. And that graphic actually makes it pretty easy to figure out exactly where the air is coming from, so you can select the desired air location to maximize your comfort. Now, interestingly, you also have a button here marked Out Temp, and if you press that, the outside temperature appears on the screen instead of your inside climate control temperature. And if you press it again, the outside temperature goes away, the climate control temperature comes back. Frankly, it'd be nice to have both, be able to see your climate control temperature and the outside temperature, but I guess that was just a little too much to ask for 1996. Now, also interesting with this climate control system, it is automatic climate control, meaning you would adjust this temperature dial over on the right to the exact desired temperature you want, and then it would blow out air to maintain that temperature inside the interior, which was a pretty luxury car touch for the 90s. Same deal, by the way, with the mirrors. This car has power folding mirrors. Not just power, but if you press this button on the side, this switch, you can automatically fold the mirrors in so you don't have to get out and do it manually, which also would have been a pretty trick feature for a non-luxury car 30 years ago. But it's probably a Japan thing, narrow streets, tight parking. You want to make sure those mirrors fold in, and so this car has the button for them. Now, aside from some niceties in here, like the sunroof, the auto climate, the power folding mirrors, it's worth pointing out this isn't exactly the most upscale interior. You look around, it is a pretty basic place to be, with a lot of cheap plastic and no real high-end amenities. There's nothing crazy luxurious in here, even though this is such a special car. And that was intentional. The Evo, like I've mentioned, was based on the Lancer economy car, and they didn't really want to spend money or weight dressing up the interior to make it nicer. And they also didn't want to add to the price of the car. So instead, they gave you a powertrain, a drivetrain, a manual transmission, all-wheel drive, all the good stuff, but they didn't really spruce up the cabin that much because it just wasn't part of the purpose of the car, which was really intended to be kind of relatively affordable speed in Japan at the time. This certainly wasn't a very cheap car in Japan, but it also wasn't intended to be a Supra or an NSX in terms of cost. And I think the interior pretty much reflects that. And next up, we move on to the back of the Evo 4. 4, which is really nothing particularly special. I'm actually surprised how much room there is, and I say that even though my knees are really pushing up against the front seat, but in a lot of Japanese economy cars in the 90s, there was even less room than this. It's not huge back here, but it's relatively large, again, bigger than I was expecting. But besides that, there's really no frills back here, which is pretty representative of how Japanese cars' back seats were all throughout the 90s. The most exciting thing is you get that cloth pattern carried over to the seats. As you can see, the backrest and the seat bottom have that rather cool looking 90s pattern from the front, and you also have it on the door panels once again. Just like you did up front, you have that pattern on the back. Aside from that, the only really notable thing back here is you get an armrest that comes out of the center seat back. It folds down and there's your armrest. No cup holders, but you did get an armrest in case you wanted just a little bit more comfort when you're sitting in the back. And finally, we move on to the trunk, the cargo area in the Evo 4. You open up the trunk, which of course opens the giant wing along with it. And you'll notice, well, again, just like the back seat, nothing particularly special in here. You have a decent sized trunk like you would expect from a car this size, with nothing interesting or exciting. One unusual thing is that it looks like there's a hole cut out for a pass-through from the trunk into the rear seats for larger items, but these seats do not fold, and you can see there's some chassis bracing in there, which I assume is intended to add to the performance level. So maybe the regular Lancer had fold-down seats, but the Evo doesn't. Unfortunately, it's hard to know for sure. Regular Lancer and Mirage models from this era are not particularly easy to come by anymore. They are most entirely off the road, but it is a hypothesis. Now, the other interesting thing in the trunk, slightly interesting, if you lift up the floor, the carpet on the floor, you can see you do have a spare tire in here, along with a few tire changing tools, should you need to, well, change your tire on the roadside in your Evo. But beyond all that stuff, obviously very curious about what this car is like out on the road. I love driving Evos. I am excited to drive this one, so let's get behind the wheel. All right, driving the Evo 4. The Evo 4. I'm a big Evo guy. I've never had one before, but I have always wanted specifically an Evo 6. Now, you could think of it as there being basically 4 Evos, even though there were 10. The 1, 2, and 3 were all based on the same Mirage, or Lancer as they called it. The 4, 5, and 6 were based on the same Mirage Lancer. The 7, 8, and 9 were based on the same Lancer, and then the 10 was like a different vehicle. I always liked the 4, 5, and 6. To me, that was like as Evo-y as it got, although the next gen, the 7, 8, 9 one, was also fantastically cool. First off, the shifter and shift action just feels wonderful. It's just like the perfect weight, and the clutch, honestly, is excellent too. It's a little heavier than I would expect, but it's like how I like it. Heavy in the way that Doug likes it, not necessarily that most people would. But it's nice and smooth. There's no stupid kink to it, which I feel like some Japanese performance cars get wrong. This one does not, under any circumstances. It feels fantastic. I'm also shocked by how good the steering feels and how quickly it seems to handle. Now, they're not moving that much car. Like I said, it's a small size and it's 3,000 pounds, but it's just pretty impressive exactly how quick and how sharp this car really is. To me, the obvious drawback is right-hand drive. I have owned right-hand drive cars. I've owned multiple right-hand drive cars. It's never really been my thing. I'm just not a fan of shifting with my left hand. It's also just hard to drive the opposite side car on the opposite side. And then there's the obvious problem with oncoming traffic and left turns. But that doesn't detract from how wonderful of an experience this car really is. And it is, I gotta be honest, a pretty wonderful experience. Now, the other drawback aside from right-hand drive, and this is a pretty obvious one, the interior quality. This has been an issue with every Evo. I mean, ultimately being based on a compact car, you're gonna have a cheap plastic compact car interior. It is just not particularly nice in here, which is a shame. It's not that big of a deal because ultimately, you know, that what their purpose was to keep costs down, keep weight down. They didn't put a lot of luxuries, so be it. But there are definitely not a lot of luxuries in this interior. 4G63 is and always was a fantastic powertrain. It's nice to drive a stock one, and just remember that even without stupid, crazy, over-the-top mods, this is a great engine. It puts on power at a fantastic spot, it spools up relatively quickly, and it just feels fast. This engine just makes this car feel really, really fast. And I'm not talking about 1996 fast. I'm talking about this car feels modern car, enjoyably, excitably fast. And And I really love a good turbocharged engine gives you so much great power in the mid-range, and that's exactly the situation here. It's just amazing what happens when like a pure enthusiast car is built. In other words, there's not much thought in beautifying it, there's not much thought in making it perfect, but there's a lot of thought in a great driving experience with a lot of power and sharp handling, and just focus on drive. Focus on drive. And that's exactly what this car does, and I think it's great. And virtually every time I drive an older Evo, it totally lives up to my expectations. And honestly, if this was a left-hand drive car, I would be tremendously interested in it personally. I want an Evo 6 so bad, and the 4 has so many of the same components. And driving this car, I remember why I love Evos so much. It's been a while since I've driven one, and I remember why. They're just so sharp, and the powertrain is so good, and they're so eager and so fun and so little and so tossable, and the power is the right amount, and it's a really great combination of things. And so that's the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 4, a cool and very special sports sedan, drives surprisingly well, and that was forbidden in the US until just a few years ago. I'm a big Evo fan, and I always love driving these pre-USA Evo models, and you can buy this one on Cars and Bids. And now it's time to give this Evo 4 a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 50 out of 100, which puts the Evo 4 here against some sort of similar cars. No surprise on this ranking in this company. The Evo 4 is cool, punchy, and surprisingly fast, with good handling and a wonderfully eager driving character. It's starting to feel old, but it still feels sporty and cool, and its biggest and maybe only letdown is its Mitsubishi Lancer economy car interior. I love these early Evo models, particularly the 4, 5, and 6, and this car reminded me what makes them so endearing.